Hello and welcome back to the Transform Awards Europe 2026. Well, I'm joined now by Gilmar Wendt, who is the founder of GW+Co. Now Gilmar, you guys have been shortlisted in 2 categories for tonight's awards with 1 client, and that's AMS Osram, of course, really interesting client. Perhaps you could tell me a little bit about them, why they came to you looking for help in the first place, and also the sheer complexities involved in that particular merger.
Mm-hmm. Of course. AMS Osram is a global player in the semiconductor industry, specifically in sensors and optosensors. So they make things that go in your phones and they make things that go in your car, the kind of thing, you know, they make machines see, really. And it's a fascinating company. And when we got involved, they had gone through a fairly turbulent time with restructurings, job losses, and a new business unit had been created. And people were asking, well, after all of this, who are we? And the leader of that business unit said, we need an identity. So our challenge was to look at change fatigue, to deal with change fatigue, with confusion, and that big question, who are we? And the problem with strategy always is that the people who decide it don't have to deliver it. And the people who deliver it, who have to deliver it, don't get a say in the decisions. And then what that means is you get that confusion and you don't get that ownership that you really want. So that was what we realized in this complexity of the situation. We couldn't do just a top-down approach like you might normally do. It had to be bottom-up at the same time.
So how did you go about achieving that then?
So it was fascinating. What you normally do in a project like this, or what would be the standard approach if you like, is you go in, you have a strategy, you do some interviews, the agency goes back, presents some solutions, and hopefully one of them wins, and that will be rolled out. And what I've observed is what often then happens is that the marketing team or the branding team who's involved in and driving it are super happy, and a lot of people in the organization say, how much did that cost? And could we have spent that money elsewhere? So we needed to avoid that. And so what we didn't do a cascade. We did top-down, bottom-up at the same time. So we ran 5 concurrent streams with top management and with people, anyone in the organization at the same time. And what happens when you do that, then outputs from one session can influence another. And through that, the organization gets into a conversation about who are we and who do we want to be. And that is super fascinating, and that worked really well in this case.
And what did you feel surprised you most in this project along the way?
There were a few things. Let me tell you one. We have this format that we call jams, which are open to anyone in the business. And in this case, we're talking about 4,000 potential participants. They are free to choose, they don't have to. And we had a few hundred. And in one of those jams, we bring people together from all over the world who do not even know each other, and we ask them a question that they need to solve as a group. And that's how we surface stories that otherwise aren't spoken. And in one of those sessions, an engineer, in response to the question, who are we and why do we exist, wrote a poem.
Really?
He did write a poem, and he, in front of his peers from all over the world, he read out his poem. And it was quite beautiful. And we thought there was one line in particular in that we thought, that really condenses so much into so few words. It's fantastic. So we said, this needs to be elevated. And in the end, we presented it as one of the options for the brand promise. And we told the story, and it was adopted. So this is now the brand promise of the business unit CSA at AMS Osram. And you can imagine when something like that happens, that news travels quickly, faster than any communications program could ever do. And the pride that people took in one of their own, having created the brand promise, that was a major factor in the adoption.
That's super. And what do you think is the real impact of the work that you've done?
The Yes, this is an interesting question, because normally when you run a brand project, I mean, the first question is, does it look good? And is it beautiful? Is it cool? Is it different? Does it communicate well? So there's all these questions. This was a business unit, so they have to carry the corporate brand. We called that project, it's branding without a brand, because we couldn't change the logo, we couldn't change the color palette in any one of these. So we had to work with a very limited set of options in the traditional sense. But we had the will, the soul, the passion of the people in spades. So we didn't create a brand in that sense. We gave them a compass with purpose, vision, priorities, the promise, and all these things in there as a framework that they could talk about themselves. And the fact that that was adopted so cleanly, so willingly, so enthusiastically was a major impact. And I can tell you another story, because a year after, I went back to moderate a leadership conference. And the next morning, I had a young man sitting next to me at breakfast. I didn't know him. Good morning, good morning. He said, "That was good last night." And I said, "Thank you." And he said, "Were you involved in this identity project?" And I said, "Yes." And then he told me, he said, "Look, we're engineers, we're skeptical people. We don't do that kind of thing." But he had read about it, he had seen it, and then he felt, this is us. And that confused him, because he didn't expect that. And then he said literally, then I found out how it was created, and I thought, now I know why there was no resistance. And when you want to change something, resistance is one of the hardest things you need to overcome. And I think it was the process and the involvement of people from every level of the organization that made that happen.
Well, that's fantastic, and it's hard to think of any higher compliments you could receive than that. Just looking back on the project altogether, where do you think brand design is heading based on your experiences here?
Mm-hmm. Good question. I think we're very good as an industry at creating beautiful branding. I love it, and I enjoy it, and I admire my colleagues as well. I think, if we're honest, we're not as good as getting it anchored in the business. And I think, as an industry, now where some of the creation becomes automated, and the actual connection between people and the connection with what you do becomes even more important, I think we need to double down on that. And for me, my insight really is that if you can use the process itself as a tool for the transformation, then you win. And I think our project showed that.
Fantastic. Well, Gilmar, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck at tonight's awards.
Thank you.